Love playing Standard on Magic Online? Check out Academy's Standard Bot in the Magic Online Classifieds for Standard Singles.
It's time to draft. This is the Born of the Gods pack, with Silent Sentinel a bit too expensive for this format. Bile Blight, Asphyxiate, and Weight of the Underworld give me 3 black removal to choose from. And then there is Siren of the Fanged Coast, either a Mind Control or 4/4 Flyer. And looking at the commons, there's a Crone Skyguard, Nyxborn Triton, and I guess a Tessin Oath Sworn if you want to consider that. The best commons are a Crone Skyguard and Asphyxiate. The best uncommons are Siren of the Fanged Coast and Bile Blight. I'm gonna go with the Skyguard here. I think it's a great way to start drafting white. If people are drafting somewhat reasonably, then they shouldn't be picking the 7-drop, but instead go for black cards, maybe the blue one as well. So then I should be well positioned with the first pick of a Crone Skyguard. This pack has Glimpse the Sun God and Spirit of the Labyrinth in white. A 3-power 2-drop is a fine card, but Glimpse the Sun God is really good in white. I would go so far as to say it's the best card in this pack. I think it's definitely better than Bolt of Karanos. The other commons are just not very exciting. And Spirit of the Labyrinth is often a disadvantage if you are the heroic deck that wants to play a lot of the comes into play, draw a card auras. Grave Robber Spider is fine, but clearly not a card that I will pick after first picking a Crone Skyguard. I'm going to take the Glimpse here and I'm quite happy about it. Somebody might want to pick up the Spirit, but I'm not going to take a weaker card just for signaling purposes. This pack is interesting. There's a rare and a common missing, but still a Retraction Helix in the pack. Krogma Butcher is also quite a potent red common 3-drop. Elite Skirmisher is fine and always playable, fits well into the curve and does something, well, sometimes. A Retraction Helix is the card I'm looking at here. It's just a unique effect that fits well into white-blue. We passed the Siren in the first pack, but we can't really not take the cards we're being passed just because of signaling. I think Retraction Helix is better than Temper and Krogma Butcher and Elite Skirmisher. I would take the Butcher over the Fearsome Temper for what it's worth. And Flitterstep Eidolon is not really in consideration because of its large bestow cost. So yeah, I'm very happy with the Retraction Helix. Or the first Retraction Helix, that is. There is another one that I could pick here. Alternatively, Loyal Pegasus and Elite Skirmisher are fine white cards. And there's another Krogma Butcher. But now that I have 2 white cards and a blue card, I think I'm more likely to go with the on-color options. It wouldn't be bad to have the Butcher, it's just it doesn't make sense to me to pick it when I could have an equally powerful card in the other colors. I'm going to go with Retraction Helix. I think this is the signals that I'm getting, and I'm happy playing 2 Retraction Helix in all of my decks basically. And from then on, I can prioritize heroic creatures accordingly. Loyal Pegasus, Elite Skirmisher are both fine, but let's take the non-creature here and prioritize creatures from now on. And I'm going to do just that by picking Nyxborn Shieldmaid over Excoriate. Swordwise Centaur, Ferris Band Trumper are solid green cards, and Nessian Demolog is not bad either. This could be a sign that green is open, which you usually don't notice early on in the draft because it's so difficult to pick green cards early because of their lower peak power level. I think that I want to fight for white though. Even though it might not be super open, I got a nice second pick and I'm getting a solid bestow creature here. This pack has Floodtide Serpent and Revoke Existence. I like to have one way to interact with opposing artifacts or enchantments, so I might just take the Revoke Existence here. My deck is already well suited to beat aura strategies thanks to the bounce, but Revoke Existence is always going to be fine. The real question is if there is a pick I can make here that moves out of white blue and into a third color. So for example, if I wanted the Satyr Nyx Smith, I could definitely pick that, with the argument being that it would be good in white red and blue red if white happens to not be open. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that. In fact, I think that Nick Smith is better than Archetype of Finality. And this leaves me a bit more open should the packs just not cooperate as I want them to. And the Revoke Existence I can always compensate for by picking Ray of Dissolution or something of that kind. There's a Deepwater Hypnotist here, which is the strongest card. There's also Meletis Astronomer, which can gain some value quite easily. It's just not a card I'm super excited about. I think the Hypnotist is a fine 2-drop. 2 power is always nice. And I'm happy for some inspired creatures as well. Alright, Kraken of the Straits is not an interesting card. The white cards here are pretty bad. The red cards are interesting. Fearsome Temper and Stormcaller of Kuranos are both kind of nice. And if I knew right now that I wasn't playing white, then I would definitely take the Stormcaller. Now, the Stormcaller is really bad if I end up in white red, and then Fearsome Temper is definitely better. I have a lack of creatures and I'm not interested in 7-drops in this format, so I'm actually going to continue diversifying with the Stormcaller, just in case my next pack shows me that I would rather be blue-red than white. Here Reckless Reveler is the only card I'm interested in. Rest of the challenge is fine but not exciting, and I'm not going to pick Lightning Volley when I already have 2 Retraction Helix. Stratus Walk coming around. I'm not picking Impetuous Sunchaser. No reason to. And no more white cards, so that's something to keep in mind. Fearsome Temper is always going to be better than Great Heart, which is just a marginal playable. I kind of like Necrobite. I think it's quite underrated because it's just good in how this format works. But Fearsome Temper is a card that I'm never unhappy about. Here it's Great Heart of Farragex Giant. The Giant is not good, but at least it does more than a 4-mana 2/4. I'm gonna pass the 8-drop and take the black 4-drop here. Not planning to go into black, but I'm open towards any possible color combination. The one thing that I did was pick the Stormcaller, so red-white got a bit weaker as a result. But if I end up in blue-red, which is quite likely given how popular white is, then I'm very happy to have this instead. Here I'm just going to take the rare Ember Swallower. Is better than the red alternatives, although Flamespeaker Adept is very sweet with Stormcaller of Kuranos. There's also Griptide in the pack. Alright, I'm not gonna get that. But Ember Swallower is just really good. So let's see. This looks very unexciting. Spellhawk Chimera is just not a card I'm excited about. I won't be able to cast the Ordeal of Erebos, so for me, this pack really doesn't have too much. Minotaur Skullcleaver is playable, Leonin Snarecaster is playable, and works somewhat nicely with my inspired creatures. But after that, it's Fate Foretold, and that's pretty much it. So, at this point, I think my white with the Skyguard and the Glimpse is a bit better, but white needs a lot more cards to make this a deck. A single Skyguard is just not cutting it, and I don't have the feeling that I'm getting Wingsteed Riders this draft. White just seems to be heavily drafted at this table, which leads me to believe that I should be aiming for red-blue. And of course, if white is open in the next pack or the next picks, then I'm going to switch. But Leonin Snarecaster to me seems like it would be the wrong card to pick here. Minotaur Skullcleaver is not amazing, but it's also never going to be awful, so yeah. Alright, and this is the pack where there's Hopeful Eidolon, Battlewise Valor, Ray of Dissolution. Not necessarily a white signal, but at least Hopeful Eidolon is in there, so white cards definitely being passed. On the other hand, Sea God's Revenge as a 3rd pick in pack 2 is definitely a card that I'm willing to drop all my white cards for. It's just it has an insane power level. In this format, bouncing 3 creatures is pretty much the best thing you can do, apart from just winning the game. Temple of Triumph would allow some white splash, for example, splashing the Glimpse the Sun God. I have a feeling that I'm better off just picking Omen Speaker here, because I have the 2 Retraction Helix, so I want creatures early on, and I want them to stay untapped if possible without giving away that I have Retraction Helix. So Omen Speaker is kind of perfect in doing that. I like picking the temples just to scry, but Omen Speaker scries for 2, so that's not really a good argument. Yeah, I'm gonna take the Omen Speaker here. And from now on, I think I'm not considering white as a legitimate option anymore. That means the Stormcaller is going to be good. I can just build a blue-red tempo deck. I know what to prioritize, and there's a small chance that I could want, for example, the Glimpse of the Sun God, but now with Sea God's Revenge, I think I'm just fine in blue-red as it is. Here, Omen Speaker would be the best 2-drop. There's also a Dragon Mantle, but my deck is not really a Dragon Mantle deck. And I could also pick Horizon Scholar as a 6-drop, because my deck is actually not very late game oriented right now. I don't like to pick Rage of Perforos because of its toughness requirement. This pick seems to be between Dragon Mantle and Omen Speaker, and you could make an argument for Horizon Scholar. However, a lot of the games in this format are decided so early by somebody just having cards that the other one can't handle or can't deal with. So I want my cheap creatures, and I want to have the Helix available starting on turn 3, so that I can prevent all these nut or deal draws from just crushing me. I'm actually going to take Annul here. There's too many cards to hate draft something. Battleize Avalanche, Sedge Scorpion, Freakus Mander, so I'm going to take a sideboard card. This pack is unexciting. I could pick Timurit, but I'm not splashing for it. I know that some people like it, but I'm not really convinced that this is a great card. There's a Spark Jolt and a Chrome Crusader, both of which are quite fine. I think that Spark Jolt has gotten quite a bit better in this format, and I like it in blue-red to deal with a lot of the troublesome creatures, especially the white heroic creatures. Now, a Chrome Crusader doesn't seem amazing. A curve of a Chrome Crusader into Omen Speaker is not what I want to be doing, even if I have 2 Retraction Helix to target it. This might be the time to pick up a Rage of Perforos. I could also go with the Colossus, which seems weird, but that would actually give me the late game that my deck has been missing. It does cost 10 to activate though, and even though I'm blue, I don't have any divinations or ways to actually get me there. So I think that's just a bit too ambitious, especially with the Ember Swallower's ultimate. Yeah, Flamespeaker Adept Wield, so that's a great sign. It means that the Spark Jolt and the Omen Speakers are just so much better, and we assembled the combo of Stormcaller of Keranos and Flamespeaker Adept. Quite happy about that. So this picking this up looks pretty good in hindsight. Spellhawk Chimera is a card that I don't like at all. To me it's just never strong enough. Usually like a 1/3, maybe 1/3 trample. And the most powerful card in this pack is Scholar of Athreos next to Tormented Hero. I'm willing to hate draft the Scholar here. I just don't like playing against it. Whereas Tormented Hero is a card that I'm sure I can beat. But I'm just not gonna even consider the Chimera. I think it's playable, but you need a very specific deck for it. And most decks where it's good in are probably quite bad. Fate Foretold versus Portent of Betrayal. It's actually quite interesting. I don't think that my deck needs Fate Foretold. I don't have a heroic deck. But Portent of Betrayal can be quite good, even in non-aggressive decks, with cards like Ordeals, or if your opponent just builds one giant monster, then you might actually want the Portent. Draw 3 for 6 has shown to be a bit too clunky for this format. As I've said, Fate Foretold, nothing exciting, but I'm just going to take it. I'm not planning to play it though. And look at that. Bident of Thassa as the rare, next to Griptide, Dragon Mantle, and some good green cards. I'm definitely taking the Bident here. I don't have many 4-drops. This makes any kind of evasion that I can pick up this pack even better. I can force my opponent's creatures to attack when they don't want to. And it's sad to see the Griptide go, but I have 2 Retraction Helix, so the Bident is definitely the card here. This pack is also interesting. Polish Crusher is nice and all, but I have the option between Triton Tactics and Voyage's End, which are just stronger than Dragon Mantle. So the argument against Voyage's End is that I already have 2 Retraction Helix, and Triton Tactics could just be a very nice trick to have in this kind of deck. Untapping your creatures, giving them extra toughness, is usually quite the blowout. On the other hand, Voyage's End is never going to be bad. It's basically one of the premium cards in the format, period. So I might just want the bounce, even though Triton Tactics can be such a blowout. Yeah, I'm gonna take Voyage's End. Voyage's End is another one of these cards that save you from the quick ordeal starts. So I'm gonna take that. And one of the reasons is that I don't have too many creatures that I want to be playing right now. So if I take the Triton Tactics, I can have awkward draws with a lot of creature dependent spells like the Retraction Helix and Triton Tactics without a way to, well, to actually target a creature. Ground Sable is fine. I'm not going to take Witch's Eye just to trigger my Inspired. Crackling Triton is really unexciting, but I'm not interested in Death Battle Raider in this kind of deck. And it's a solid 2/3 that I might be able to sacrifice to kill a creature from time to time. Okay, these packs are not very exciting. I think Stymied Hopes is fine, but I'm not too keen on running it. Its late game value is just so low. The option here, I think, is between Coastline Chimera and Rage of Perforos. I don't need Arena Athlete or Setter Rambler. I have enough 2-drops to make that work. Coastline Chimera is actually quite good, even though it costs, it costs white to activate. Just having a 1/5 flyer can be very valuable, and I haven't picked up any of the good flyers, like Pressing Chimera. I have 1 Rage of Perforos, and I think that should be enough. Even though it's better in this deck than in most other decks of the format, I'm gonna go with the Chimera here. And this pack has another Skull Cleaver. I'm thinking that I might not even play the one I have already, so that doesn't seem like the card that I want. Mnemonic Wall is a card that works in the deck I'm drafting, but I'm never very happy with it. The problem is the only alternative is Peak Eruption, which is basically a sideboard card, but not a very good one. I like it against decks with Nylea's Presence. That's kind of cute, but I'm just not gonna go that route. So I'm gonna pick Mnemonic Wall to bring it in against grindy matchups. I think that seems a lot better than picking Minotaur Skull Cleaver. And who knows? I can see a world where Mnemonic Wall actually ends up in the main deck. Here there's another Flamespeaker Adept. I was lacking with 3-drops by now, and the Scry trigger is actually amazing. There's Fire Crusader, Rage of Perforos, all fine, but Flamespeaker Adept is going to be one of the best cards in my deck. It's kind of sad that I didn't see Aquarius form, because that's just a very good combo with the Adept. Here it's Ill-Tempered Cyclops or Rage of Perforos. And now that I have 2 Flamespeaker Adepts and quite a lot of solid creatures, I think I can do without the Cyclops, but I like the Scry trigger. So let's take another removal spell here. This pack is interesting. Crackling Triton, Portent of Betrayal, or God's Willing. I could just take out the God's Willing if I knew that I wasn't ever going to play one of these guys. But Crackling Triton, when you are in the right colors, is actually not horrible. And I have 1 Portent of Betrayal. I can't really see myself playing 2 with the amount of spells that I already have and the defensive nature of my deck. Satyr Rambler is not going to make my deck, so I can take out a Tormented Hero, which might give me some trouble. Dragon Mantle, I've said before, is not really the card that this deck wants, but it might still be the best pick, because a Crown Crusader wouldn't be a card that I would play in my main deck. And that just leaves the second Portent, which I talked about already, and a Dragon Mantle. Alright, Witch's Eye, still not good enough. I'm gonna take Last Breath. And Arena Athlete is actually fine. I can't really see myself targeting it too often with a retraction helix to push something through, but at least it's a trigger that might do something sometimes. Like I said, I don't think that Simetopes is where I want to be going. And Lost in a Labyrinth, it could actually be a card that I want to play with 2 Flamespeaker Adepts, but as is often the case, I think that I have far too many playables to consider these kind of cards. Good, this worked out. Leaving behind the white was definitely the right choice. Maybe because of the cards I passed, but also because I wasn't really seeing good cards after first picking the Skyguard and then the Glimpse. There was a late Shieldmate, but people were just drafting white cards, or too many people were drafting white cards, which is what is usually the problem in these kind of in this format overall. Alright, there's a lot of cards I can cut, but I'm gonna see how this looks first. So yeah, the 5-drop slot is definitely a bit clunky. I only have a single 6-drop, which I could definitely do with one more, but at least it's a super powerful card, so I'm not unhappy about that. I think that Zeta Rambler is an easy cut. Reckless Reveler is already borderline, but at least it has a solid late game application if your opponent has some artifacts or maybe an equipment. And then I have to decide how I want to have this deck look. Now, my first instinct is to cut a lot of creatures, and that means cutting most of the creature dependent cards because they will just not be good enough. And then cards like Minotaur Skullcleaver are pretty easy cuts because I don't want to be single-mindedly aggressive, which the Skullcleaver is a bit too much. That means Portent of Betrayal and probably also Fearsome Temper are just not cutting it. I'm kind of like Stratus Walk because the evasion is very powerful in my deck. And I might also need it against flyers on defense. Now, this is 26 with 15 creatures. I have 2 Omen Speakers. I think this is a typical example of just playing 17 lands with a lot of scry to get me to the cards that I actually want. I like the Coastline Chimera. I'm not a fan of Farragix Giant. I think it's just often going to be the case that my opponent takes 5 and I have a 5 mana 3/3. So I'm rather cutting the Giant than the Mnemonic Wall. But even the Mnemonic Wall might not be the right card for this deck. I just like how I have a lot of bounce, so I can actually reuse some of my more potent spells. For example, I could return Sea God's Revenge by bouncing Mnemonic Wall with one of my cheaper cards. So I need to cut 2 more cards. Lost in a Labyrinth is usually a very easy cut. With 2 Flamespeaker Adepts, I think it becomes a lot more playable. It is a combat trick, so it's not impossible to play it. However, I have to cut 2 cards, and Dragon Mantle is just a very solid package, even though I have no first strike in this deck to make it really good. I could just put it on Coastline Chimera and get in there. It's also a card draw spell early on in the game, so I'd rather not cut a Dragon Mantle from this deck, but I could definitely see it. So Spark Jolt, Dragon Mantle, Lost in a Labyrinth, Stratus Walk are probably the weakest cards, and I want to keep in the Spark Jolt. It scries and it deals with troublesome permanents, so that's definitely in. Now Lost in the Labyrinth has the advantage of scrying, which is very nice with the Flame Speakers. Dragon Mantle is the best card in a vacuum, and Stratus Walk could give my deck potent things that it otherwise doesn't have access to. So it allows me to deal with flyers a bit more easily. It allows me to give evasion to the Nixsmith. I would prefer to have Aquarius Farm, of course, but I actually think that Stratus Walk is going to be better than Dragon Mantle, which is kind of sad. I hate leaving this on the sidelines, but this deck wants the Rage of Perforos more and wants to have a better late game given by our nice blue cards over here. Yeah, this is interesting. I could think about this longer, but I think I have a solid setup now with the Ember Swallower, I want double red. With Biden of Thassa, I want double blue. But the mana overall is very good. And I might just want to add one more island so that I can have access to Omen Speaker, which will find me mountains. I also have more blue cards, so that makes sense. And Magic Online even agrees. Alright, this is an interesting deck because blue-red is not one of the pillars of the format, but I like how it looks. The Mnemonic Wall hopefully proves its worth. There's a couple of cards I can see being better than the wall, but I'll try the wall in the main deck. I've never played it in Theros because it was really bad, but now this might be a deck where it's actually, well, solid, maybe even quite good. Well, let's see.